On a frigid January morning, a colossal storage tank stood like a giant metal sentinel at 529 Commercial Street, its walls straining to contain a staggering 2.3 million US gallons of molasses. What could cause such a massive container to suddenly and catastrophically fail? The answer would soon become gruesomely clear as the very fabric of the tank gave way, unleashing a torrent of molasses into the bustling North End neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. The date was January 15th, 1919, and in an instant, the lives of everyone in the surrounding streets would be forever altered. As the tank's steel walls ruptured, a gigantic wave of molasses began to rush through the streets, its sticky, dark mass moving with a speed and force that would leave a trail of devastation in its wake. People ran for their lives, trying to outrun the wave of molasses as it swept through the streets, crashing into buildings and overturning horses and carts. The sticky, heavy liquid engulfed everything, from street lamps to homes, leaving a trail of destruction and chaos in its path. Residents of the North End neighborhood scrambled to escape, some clinging to rooftops or trees as the molasses rushed below, others desperately trying to outrun the wave, but it was moving too fast. The scene was one of utter panic, with people screaming and trying to find a way to safety as the molasses continued to surge forward, its force and speed leaving no time to react. And as the wave crashed through the streets, the question on everyone's mind was, would they be able to escape the deadly deluge? As the molasses swept through, it engulfed horses and carts, pulling them under its thick, heavy mass that terrified whinnies muffled by the sticky tide. People clung to lampposts and building facades, desperate to avoid being pulled under, their faces contorted in terror as the molasses rose up to their chests. The wave crashed into buildings, shattering windows and splintering wooden doors, as if the very foundations of the city were being torn apart. A child, separated from its parents, stumbled through the knee-deep molasses, crying out for help, its tiny hands reaching up towards the few who were desperately trying to grab onto anything that could keep them afloat. And as the molasses continued to flow, it was clear that the destruction was far from over, the full extent of the devastation still unfolding. Rescuers waded through the waist-deep molasses, their legs heavy with the weight of the sticky liquid as they desperately tried to reach those trapped beneath the surface. A woman, her hair matted with molasses, clung to a wooden beam, her eyes fixed on the rescuers as they struggled to pull her to safety. Nearby, a team of workers tried to lift a horse, its legs tangled in a mess of debris. But the molasses was too thick, too heavy, and the animal let out a pained whinny as it slipped beneath the surface. As the rescuers continued their desperate efforts, the death toll began to climb, and with each new discovery, the reality of the disaster grew more grim, the question echoing through the chaos. How many more were still trapped, still crying out for help, beneath the suffocating tide of molasses? As the rescuers dug deeper, the streets revealed their horrific toll. A child's doll, sticky with molasses, clutched in a lifeless hand. A horse, its eyes frozen in terror, struggled to free itself from the syrupy trap. The number of fatalities rose, each new body pulled from the molasses, a stark reminder of the disaster's devastating power, until the count reached 21, a staggering figure that seemed to grow more unthinkable with each passing moment. Meanwhile, over 150 people, their faces etched with pain and fear, were rushed to hospitals, their lives hanging precariously in the balance, as doctors and nurses fought to save them from the deadly grip of the molasses, their efforts hindered by the very substance that had caused such chaos, its sticky residue clinging to everything it touched, refusing to let go. As the news of the disaster spread, panic and desperation gripped the North End neighborhood, with people and animals struggling to free themselves from the molasses that had engulfed the streets. The once thriving commercial district was now a scene of unimaginable horror, with buildings, cars, and even trees smothered under a thick, heavy layer of molasses that seemed to cling to everything it touched. Rescue workers were seen wading through the molasses, their faces covered in anguish as they searched for survivors, while others were trying to dig out those who were trapped under the sticky, suffocating deluge. The death toll continued to rise, with 21 people confirmed dead and over 150 injured, leaving the community to wonder how such a tragedy could have occurred. The streets, once filled with the sounds of laughter and commerce, were now eerily quiet, except for the sound of molasses dripping from the buildings and the cries of those who were still clinging to life. As the days passed, the streets remained shrouded in a sticky, sweet haze, with molasses coating everything from buildings to streetcars, and even the harbor itself. Workers in knee-deep boots trudged through the mess, armed with hoses and scrapers, attempting to chip away at the molasses that had hardened like a thick brown glacier. The cleanup effort was a Herculean task, with workers laboring to restore even a semblance of order to the devastated area. Salt water from the harbor was pumped in to help dissolve the molasses, but it was a slow and arduous process, and as the first week drew to a close, the streets still resembled a war zone, with debris and wreckage scattered everywhere, and the question on everyone's mind: how would the city ever be able to fully recover from this disaster? As the cleanup efforts continued, investigators from the city began to scrutinize the Purity Distilling Company's facility, located at 529 Commercial Street near Keeney Square. They focused on the storage tank that had burst, releasing the devastating wave of molasses, and found that it had been woefully inadequate for the task of containing 2.3 million gallons of molasses. The tank's steel walls, once thought to be sturdy, were now seen as tragically insufficient, and the company's decision to store such a massive amount of molasses in a residential area raised serious questions about their priorities. A forensic engineer, kneeling beside the ruptured tank, examined the twisted metal, his eyes narrowing as he contemplated the catastrophic failure and the death toll of 21, with over 150 injured, that had resulted from it. The engineer's findings would be crucial in determining the company's accountability, and as he gathered his data, the people of Boston's North End waited anxiously for answers, wondering if justice would be served and if the city would ever be able to trust the companies that operated within its borders again, as the weight of the disaster still lingered, like the molasses that stubbornly clung to the streets. As the people of Boston's North End neighborhood struggled to come to terms with the disaster, they couldn't help but look at the Purity Distilling Company's facility at 529 Commercial Street with a mix of anger and suspicion, its walls now a haunting reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. The question on everyone's mind was how such a catastrophe could have been allowed to happen, and whether the company's recklessness had directly contributed to the loss of 21 lives. Residents pointed to the storage tank, its ruptured remains a stark testament to the devastating power of the molasses that had once filled it, and wondered if it had been adequately maintained, or if warnings had been ignored. The city's investigators were now poring over the tank's design and construction, searching for any signs of negligence as the people of Boston waited with bated breath for the truth to finally come to light. As the city struggled to come to terms with the devastation, a young lawyer named Isaac Medina stood amidst the ruins, surveying the damage to the nearby homes and businesses. He would go on to represent many of the victims' families in their quest for justice, fighting for compensation from the Purity Distilling Company. The company's lawyers would argue that the disaster was an act of God, but Medina would counter that it was a result of gross negligence. The case would drag on for years, eventually reaching the Massachusetts Supreme Court, where the company would ultimately be held liable for the damages. Meanwhile, the people of the North End would continue to rebuild, their lives forever changed by the sticky, sweet scent of molasses that still lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of that terrible day, a memory that would seep into the city's fabric. As the city's investigators delved deeper into the disaster, the true extent of the tragedy became clearer, and with it, a sense of resolve began to form. The people of Boston's North End neighborhood, though forever changed by the devastating flood, slowly started to rebuild and heal. The Purity Distilling Company's storage tank, once a symbol of industrial pride, now stood as a haunting reminder of the importance of safety and responsibility. In the end, the Great Molasses Flood would serve as an enduring lesson etched in the city's history, a reminder that even the most mundane structures can hold the power to shape lives, and that the consequences of neglect can be catastrophic, leaving behind a city forever scarred and a street where the shadows of that fateful day still linger.